everybody. On this week's episode of Grassroots Racer, we have a man who has worked with Porsches a long time. He started back at a Ford dealership, then he raced for many years, but we've got to wait for the chat. So with that, I present Mike Jacobson.
Ayrton.
Thanks for joining me, Mike. It's been a while since we've, chatted in real life, so let's catch up on this Zoom meeting.
It has been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah. Let's go back to your first car, which, if I'm correct, was a Ford Escort.
Yes. Oh, actually, no. The first car that I raced was a Mark 1 Cortina. It was actually a Cortina GT, a genuine one. And if I had have known how prices were going to go now, I certainly wouldn't have probably used that particular car. I actually got did a couple of years of club sprints in that with the Ford 4 Car Club. And I actually got my CAMS license at the James Hunt meeting at Winton. So it's going back into ancient history.
Right, just so for people out there who may not know, what sort of engine did you have in it, and like what year of car was it?
Okay, originally it had the standard 1500 pushrod engine from that came with the car, the GT Cortina, and that was a 1965 model. So as I felt like I had to go faster, we decided to fit a 2 litre out of a Escort into it, and that obviously went a lot faster, and I basically got used to competing in that and doing we did called a 6-hour relay race in it, which at the time I think was run by the Mini Club. So I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was run by the Mini Car Club. And then the poor old thing got killed at Sandown in 1979 at a National Sports Sedan Championship round, and hit the bridge at the Causeway, and that was the end of that.
So the engine was a 2 litre Pinto, I think? I don't know. Exactly,
that's right.
But yeah, you said it was ridden off at Sandown. What happened? Also, while we're here, if you didn't know, Sandown used to be different back in the day. We were chatting about this the other night. So you go through turn 1, and instead of that little chicane to slow down before the back straight, it used to just be a straight line. It used to catch people out at turn 1.
Turn 1 and turn 2 were really very different to what they are now. In fact, the main straight was longer, and there was a strip of grass between the track and the Armco fencing, which was probably about 30, maybe 40 metres wide. So there's very little runoff there. And then you would go straight from turn 1, which is a similar radius to what it was now, and straight into the same corner as what it was at the moment. But you didn't have that wiggle going into it, so the entry speed was much higher. The tail went out on me going across the Causeway, which was the corner onto the main straight, and was under the Dunlop Bridge. So that was a very, very fast corner with very little runoff. And we discovered later that one of the rear shockers had gone on it, and that's what caused it to just snap out on me, or step out on me. It's always been a very challenging track and unforgiving, and it still is, particularly over the top of the hill. It's still very unforgiving, very fast.
Move on. You said that you bought a Ford Escort off an older lady, so tell us a bit about what you did to it.
The Escort started life off as a little old lady shopping car. Typical story. And it was a 1300 and in the process of converting it to the race car, it still had the standard engine in it for some time while I was driving it on the road. But in that time, we'd stripped it out, put the suspension in it, the roll cage, and it still then had the 1300. And it was only at the very end that we put the engine out of the Cortina into it, and then went off and raced it at, where was it, Winton, I think was the first place that we took it to.
Well, you developed the car after you crashed the Mark 1 Cortina. So a couple of years after, you won the 1982 Victorian Sports Sedan under 2-litre championship. So that probably put your confidence back, but that wasn't enough. And then you became back-to-back champion in the Victorian Sports Sedan. So tell us about those 2 years. What made you better than the rest?
I think I was probably just more dedicated to the task in a lot of respects. My aim and ambition was always to go racing to as high a level as I could. And to go along with that, my biggest problem was I never had the money to do that. And to get sponsorship, as you'd know, I mean, it's not easy. I think these days it's possibly a bit easier because of the whole media coverage of motorsport and, just the accessibility to things like Facebook and being able to get out there and show people what you can do, not so much show yourself off, but showcase yourself and be able to approach people in such a way that you've got, sort of like with Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, you've got a catalogue of photos and records of what you've done and where you've been and all the rest of it. Back then, none of that existed, and you had to go out and basically knock on doors, talk to people that were friends of friends, or just use any contacts that you had.
The Grassroots Racer is on Facebook, and we're showing a bit on Instagram. But like you said, social media has made, I guess, promoting things a lot easier, and that's why it's great to have a chat to you guys, because some of you guys who used to race back before technology, it was hard for you to get yourself out there. After 1982, you converted the car to a rotary. Can you give us some more info about that?
Yeah, we got to the stage where we've pretty much done what was possible with the 2-litre as the car was. To have taken the 2-litre any further would have meant really cutting a lot of weight out of it, and just you still wouldn't have got a lot more from it. At the time, my best lap time at Winton was 1:07.2 seconds, which was, it was pretty close to as good as anyone could do with them. Then initially thought about putting a turbo on it. And another guy that I was racing with was Jeff Groves, and he'd actually gone that route, and he was getting all sorts of reliability issues. So we decided to go for a rotary. And initially it was a 13B Bridgeport, and then we went to a more developed Bridgeport, and then a succession of peripheral ports on top of that. So yeah, the car was pretty good. It had a very good weight distribution. It was I think about 50%, and it had about 300 horsepower and 780 kilos. So it was pretty good.
Yeah, that definitely sounds pretty good, especially for I guess you could always say back then. What sort of tracks would you race, or is that still in the Victorian Sports Sedan Championship?
At that time, Phillip Island wasn't used, so I just missed out on going to Phillip Island when, in the late 70s, when they stopped using it, and then I finished my racing just after Phillip Island was, they started using it again. So I didn't get down there. I have been around it as in the passenger seat, but I haven't actually driven around it. But having said that, I did Winton a lot, Calder, Sandown, Hume Weir. That was just a club sprint day. I went up to Amaroo Park in Sydney, which is long gone now, unfortunately. It was a fantastic place. I went up there about 3 or 4 times over a couple of years. And that was about it. I was going to go over to Adelaide International, but never actually got there because we had issues. I think that was even unrelated to the car, but I just couldn't make it. So unfortunately, I didn't get there.
You also told me that you raced at Mullera and I'm pretty sure that's how you say it, and Oran Park.
Yeah.
So what were those tracks like? But now Oran Park's gone, so.
It was great. It was, unfortunately, I went up there, did a few practice laps on the Friday, had troubles with the car and had to pack up and come home. So we missed the weekend and we basically drove all night, Thursday night, to get to Oran Park, and then had to pack up and come home. So that was a very big day, that one. The other track, of course, that I did was Symmons Plains, and that was fantastic. I loved that.
Symmons Plains. So for those who don't know, that's in Tasmania. And quick question, did you take, go through turn 1 and then you got that long straight and you got the hairpin? Do you take the wide line or the inline?
In my car, and at the time when I went there, because you got to remember, it's all changed a lot since then. But you would take a fairly wide line to enter it and a very tight line coming out.
Depending on what the weather's like, sometimes they'll come in and they'll tuck in, or sometimes they'll go, hang on the outside. So I was just wondering what sort of line you'd take.
Well, yeah, it was probably about half to 3/4 of the way out from the middle, so over towards the right-hand side of the track as you go in, and then keep it fairly tight on the way out and have a very, let the car just sort of flow out to the outside after that.
Moving a bit of years forward into 1990, you ran the Winton 24-hour in a Porsche with Mike Tankard.
Exactly, yes.
And you both did 12 hours each, if I'm correct.
No, it was about 12 hours between us. So it was I think Mike did 6.5 hours and I did, 6 hours or something like that. It's a long time ago though, but it was the 24-hour only ever ran probably for about 3 or 4 years, and it was one of those. It was a state level race. It wasn't done as a relay or a regularity style thing as such as the Phillip Island 6 hour now, where you nominate a time and you have to stay as close to that time as you can. So the 24-hour race was just that. It was you had 6 cars in a team, and you would then, it was just the fastest on the day, and you'd just come in and you'd change the sash in the pit stops, and the next car would go out. In that way, run exactly the same as the 6 hour now, but it was an outright race. There was nothing about regularity. There was nothing about anything else other than just pure speed to get you there at the end. And reliability helped too. That was, I'll never forget going through the sweeper at Winton at sunrise, and it was just absolutely dazzling blind. It was just incredible. Another thing that was very memorable from that weekend was the first practice session, or the qualifying session that I did was that wet that it was actually cancelled during the time I was out.
How did you go in the 24-hour?
Well, we won. Mike and I had done just over half the distance, because the other cars in the team, which was for the Porsche Club of Victoria, and that's another thing too, that it was a team entered event. It wasn't just single entries for each car. It was each team had 6 cars in it, and it was a matter of whichever of those could keep going, and they just keep going and get through to the end. We had Mike and I shared the one car, which was his, and that one just kept going and going. Every other car in the team had some sort of problem, whether it was electrical, clutches, all sorts of things. But yeah, the little orange jet just kept going.
All right, and you also told me you had a HQ and you did some racing that year. So what did you race?
Yeah, the HQ. I did about 6 months. I had that for about 6 months. It was a bit of a rushed decision to put it together. I think it was about the October of '89 that we decided to put it together. And so went out and bought a HQ, standard worn out old road car. 6 weeks later, we're up at Winton to give it a run, and that included, I don't know how many, nights after midnight, just making it all happen. And while that was a great experience, it was also something I probably should never have done.
So you did some racing in the HQ. Then 1991, you were at Calder Park and you had a crash. So what happened there?
Yeah, that was on the Thunderdome in the HQ, and that's what basically finished off the HQ. I did repair it. It got back together and it was running again. It was still behaving quite well, but it was just, I'd lost the enthusiasm for that car at the time. So that was Calder was about its last meeting for me. But we did do a social day that was up at held by the HQ Association at Winton after that, when it went back together, and that was just a lot of fun. The crash at Calder, there was myself and I think it was Jim, someone or other, in the other car, and the two of us had been nose to tail, door handle to door handle for about 20 or so, 20 of the 25 laps. It was fantastic. It really was. And then we just clipped, and that was enough to send me up into the embankment at the top of the hill, and spun it back down the hill. I was just lucky that nobody sort of was coming at the same time.
You and first were leading by that much that no one was able to hit you, luckily. But it was
we were actually in about second and third and fourth positions. There was, in actual fact, Bruce Williams, I think from memory, who is the editor Auto Action, he was leading.
Oh, okay. It's very good. And then that happened. But then in 1992, the Australian Porsche Cup, you took over the R&D and prep for Mike Tankard, who ended up winning the championship. So do you think you were a vital key, I guess, to helping him win the championship?
Yeah, well, it was funny because Mike had been running his car for a few years before I met him, actually. And he was already been talking to John Gregory, who became my father-in-law at the time. and about doing the preparation on the car. And it was just after the 24-hour that I started working for John. And so it was a bit of a natural progression that we were given the task to prepare and develop the car. And Mike had a background of racing trail bikes and doing trials and that sort of thing. And he was very good. With the two of us drove in a very similar manner. And I could at different tracks, particularly at Sandown, we were he could not catch the guy who was leading his class, because at that time the Porsche Cup was actually run in class A, B, and C, and that was all determined by power to weight ratio. And what happened is that Andy Nicolaides he dominated the Class B for probably 2 or 3 years prior to this, and basically won everything. He was untouchable. And anyway, after we started being involved with Mike's car, I put a bit of sports sedan thinking into it, and John had a massive Porsche experience. So it was a blend of those two things, and it really worked out well. We did a few things in the front suspension that nobody else had done at the time. And I'd go out and do the testing in the car, and Mike would just have to go and jump in it and go race it. And it was a really, really good and valuable relationship, and I'm still good mates with him now. It was one particular meeting at Sandown in particular. He said, "I just can't catch Andy." And I said, "Right, just talk me around the track. Let me know what you're doing." And anyway, he said he'd back off and go back to 4th gear to go over the top of the hill at what used to be Rothman's Rise. And I said, "Mate, no way. Don't do that. Just flat over the top until you start running down the hill." And he did that. He came back and he was white. But so excited, because he trimmed about 2 seconds off his lap times and beat Andy. So yeah.
Gee, yeah, that's a big difference just by taking it flat over the hill. Oh yeah, you go.
I got to tell you though, Ayrton, it was a big deep breath, and it just almost closed the eyes and pointed in the right direction. So yeah.
Well, I guess that's what racing's for, trying to find how far you can push it. You said you had a good relationship with your father-in-law, and now you and him both, I'm going to say, both run Spyder Automobiles. Tell the viewers what you guys specialise in.
Okay, right. Well, John actually passed away in 2003. Since then, I've carried on without him, and up to 2011, his daughter and my wife at the time, Lisa, she was still involved, but she passed away in 2011. So since then, I've been doing it by myself, and we did a lot of club cars. Cars that do club events. Developed a lot of cars that went on and did tarmac rallies with really good success, multiple class winnings, and outright podiums, all this sort of thing. Number of times, the cars that were developed for the Porsche Club particularly were sort of winning classes. Good mate of mine, Wayne Walker, his little Toyota MR2. Between the two of us, we did a lot of development on that, and he won, what was it, 3, I think, Australian hill climb championships. And so we've had a fairly good record, and a variety of different things. And now I'm doing a lot of what I call special interest cars. So things that are not necessarily your everyday thing cars. I look after a Marcos GT with a 3-litre Capri V6 in it. Lotus 7, Lotus Elan, Triumph GT6, a number of Porsches. I'm still doing tarmac rally preparation. In fact, there was a car that we look after, two cars actually that we look after, just been down in Target, Tasmania.
Wow, are they they're like the quickest class, or what sort of class are they?
The two that have done the last couple of Target Tasmanias have just gone in the touring class, or touring category, which is basically just it's non-competitive, but you still get to do the same route as what the competitive cars do, but they are restricted to 120 k's an hour, and it's still quite. They don't have a restriction on cornering or anything else like that. It's just outright speed. But this year, Dave Chapman, who's got a black 911 with the green stripes down it, he actually led that class and took over from the last couple of years of it being led by Jim Richards.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's very cool, to see cars that you work on actually winning. That's interesting. I didn't know that that was the class and it was restricted to go 120 kilometers an hour. When do you think you can get me into the Porsche Career Cup Series, Mike?
Thanks, mate. No, look, I'm past doing any really competitive racing now. Simply because of age, time, and financially. It's super expensive, and as much as I'd love to have gone further than what I did, it's the costs have just gone out of control.
I really want to thank you so much, Mike, for joining me this week on Grassroots Racer. You've been awesome chatting to, and you've definitely had an amazing career. And I'd like to thank everyone who listens and watches this segment of Grassroots Racer. So remember, drive fast and take chances.
Not too many chances.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Ayrton. It's been really good, and good luck for whatever you end up doing.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for that chat. That was good.